Now, some cities in the United States have begun reparation processes to address the impact of the past. The country has a history of discrimination, racism and slavery. Let's discuss this now with First Repair Executive Director Robin Rue Simmons. Robin, good to have you and thank you very much for your time. Where is this particular matter as far as Congress is concerned? The issue of slavery reparations, it's been, of course, a divisive one.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I have to say I am grateful to be here. As reparations relates to congressional progress, it is languishing. It was introduced in Congress in 1989 by Rep. John Conyers and has not had a floor vote since. Under the leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, it did pass out of committee, but we still are making that demand for a national response to reparations. And in the meantime, cities and states like Evanston, Illinois, the state of California, the state of New York have begun its own process of reparations, reckoning with our nation's sins and harms and crimes against the humanity of Black people. And in Evanston, Illinois, in 2019, we passed the nation's first tax-funded reparations legislations to repair the harms against the Black community. We did that in 2019. We began dispersing reparations benefits last year, and we have continued that disbursement last week with the final 454 of our direct descendants.
Yeah, others would have placed this particular reparation process at a cost of what, $14 trillion US? That would be a national figure, I suppose, they say, to eliminate the racial wealth gap. How much actually are these cities willing to disperse?
Well, it's case by case. You know, municipalities are large and small. In our case in Evanston, Illinois, we're a small city. We're 75,000. We have about 15% Black population. We've started with $20 million. Cities like Chicago, Illinois, that just made its first commitment to reparations will look very different. The state of California will look very different. And so the local reparations approach is hyper-local. It's specific to the harm in that community. We know that we can't address the national harm. We can't address the legacies of slavery in its totality, but we can look at what cities, governments, elected officials, institutions locally have done that was anti-Black and that is responsible for our current racial segregation, our current wealth gap, education gap, home ownership gap, our current discrimination still in policing, over-policing, mass incarceration, and so on. And so we understand that there is a multi-trillion-dollar budget at a federal level. At a local level, it is very different. But we know that if we continue local initiatives, one city, one locality, one county, one state at a time, that like many other important legislations that were transformational in the United States passed, hyper-locally with grassroots initiatives and local leaders like hundreds in the United States, that we will get to the support and the demand and the political will for a national case. And so in Evanston, we started with $10 million. We've added an additional $10 million. You know, the committee is committed to finding many millions more and finding other ways to address the harms, not just in the forms of compensation in which we are giving now, cash benefits and other forms of direct benefits. We want to really honor and respect international law standards. Yeah. There are 5 components to full repair. We are fortunate to be in partnership and in community with members of the United Nations, our organizations, and others here in the United States, having visited many times. We'll be returning actually in April. But we understand that there are 5 components to full repair. Compensation and restitution are only 2, that cash check that we hear about so much. We're also looking at guarantee of non-repetition cessation. We're looking at policy reform, the anti-Black policy that got us to this condition today. We're looking at rehabilitation, restoring the dignity of our people. In many cases, that means some forms of repatriation, definitely more true Black and African history. And we're also looking at satisfaction. And satisfaction is an area where we're seeing a lot of milestones and wins. We're seeing holidays like Juneteenth as a federal holiday. We're seeing acknowledgments and monuments being erected to honor Black community. And so we are seeing some milestones. We have to celebrate every milestone. We know that we are looking to correct over a 400-year harm, and that is being initiated by localities like Evanston, Illinois, like Detroit, Michigan, like the city of San Francisco, like Amherst, Massachusetts, and Asheville, North Carolina. There's a long list. In fact, there are over 100 localities in the United States that have begun a process of local reparations. And at First Repair, we just received 226 local leaders as guests in our city to think about, strategize, share best practices, and continue strengthening and enforcing the case for reparations here in the United States. Understanding we are part of the global Black community, that this is a diaspora matter.
So speaking of those best practice, is this even a question, I suppose, at that local level? Who would get the money? Is it all Black Americans, or is it descendants of particular people that get paid? How is it worked out?
In our city and in most localities, it is those that were harmed and were Black. And so specifically in Evanston, we had a period of harm between 1919 and 1969 where there were anti-Black zoning laws that were harmful to the Black community. So anybody Black, no matter their lineage or heritage or culture, Black is Black is Black in Evanston. We, descendants of Africans, we are eligible because we were Black and harmed in Evanston and their direct descendants. So myself, as a direct descendant of my mother and grandmother and prior generations in Evanston, am eligible, and we don't have any other types of lineage requirements, where there are other initiatives that are looking more at a lineage-based approach to eligibility. That's not the case in most, and that is not the case in Evanston.
We appreciate your time. Robin Rue Simmons, thank you very much for coming on, founder and executive director at First Repair.